agenda. Again, folks, Breitbart News Sunday. We got on the line right now Craig Shirley, one of the best Reagan biographers there is out there. He's the author of Last Act: The Final Years, An Emerging Legacy of Ronald Reagan. I've got the book in front of me right now. I've barely just started reading it, Craig, as I just got it in the mail the other day. Walk us through, Craig, what is in your new book on Ronald Reagan?
Well, first of all, thanks for being with you. It's one of the aspects of Reagan's career that's never been covered, and that is the last 16 years of his life after leaving the White House. And I was working on some research one night several years ago, and my then 9-year-old son Mitchell, looked up from highlighting, Reagan's name and all these newspaper articles, and he said, "Dad, has anybody ever done a book about Reagan after he was president?" I thought for a moment, and I said no. So that was the beginning of Last Act. That was 4 or 5 years ago. So this is now the culmination of a lot of research, a lot of interviewing, a lot of people, a lot of talking to a lot of people, a lot of material, a lot of and what people will find is the shorthand explanation for Reagan's post-presidency is incorrect. The shorthand is that he went back to California, announced he had Alzheimer's, and died. Well, that's not true at all. There was a lot of living that went on in those 16 years, a lot of speeches and a lot of, building libraries and world tours. And
a former president really does still represent the United States. And so, he was representing the United States quite a bit. And so I've got the breakdown sheet here. And again, folks, I literally just got my copy, so I'm going to start reading it very soon. Everything that Craig writes is worth reading, so I highly recommend everybody go get the book.
Thank you, Matt.
But the some of the bullet points here. So apparently you've got the inside story in this book about how at Reagan's funeral, of all places, people like Bill and Hillary Clinton, the rest of the political elites, really tried to zone in and like gain political capital out of Reagan's funeral. Walk us through that. What I would take us into that scene.
Well, your listeners need to understand that a Washington funeral is simply an extension of the Washington cocktail party. There's a lot of, rubbernecking and a lot of glad handing and a lot of passing of business cards. Actually, the Reagan funeral was unlike most other Washington funerals, and it was not that way, but still, there were people like Bill Clinton. Hillary just didn't want to be there, and it was obvious from the look on her face, the scowl on her face, that she wanted to be any place other than at Reagan's funeral, and her partisanship had been known for her sharp, over-the-top partisanship had been known for years. When she was First Lady, when Pat Nixon died, now decorum demanded that the current First Lady go to the funeral of a former First Lady, but Hillary didn't go, instead hosting a fundraiser for a Democratic female candidate in the White House instead of going to Pat Nixon's funeral. And Richard Nixon never forgave her for that. But there were some people who were not didn't comport themselves with absolute decorum. Like Al Gore kept squawking about his seating arrangement, and he wanted to sit up with the adults, and was finally told, look, you were a creature of the legislative branch, not the executive branch. You sit with the senators and congressmen. You don't sit with the former presidents, because you're not a creature of the executive branch. And it got so bad that they had to threaten him with pulling his ticket unless you just sat down and shut up.
It's so unbelievable the way that the liberals and the elitists here are just like literally playing musical chairs like a wedding or something at a funeral. Like, but I
haven't gotten to Bill Clinton, because his behavior was even worse. He wanted to speak at the Reagan funeral. Now, the funeral had been in the planning, and the speakers set for many, many years, and it was going to be Brian Mulroney, it was going to be Margaret Thatcher, world leaders, consequential world leaders. It was going to be former President Bush because of his close association with Reagan. It was going to be the religious leaders of the National Cathedral, and whoever the current president of the United States was, and it happened to be George W. Bush, a Republican.
Right.
And Bill was squawking and said, "Yeah, make it bipartisan. You got to get me up there." And he was badgering everybody.
He wanted to have a bipartisan funeral.
Yeah, that's right. That was his argument. It was a bipartisan funeral.
That's going to be the most insane thing I've ever heard.
Well, certainly vain. That's for sure. And he just made himself a complete nuisance, just badgering everybody, calling everybody, having intermediaries call. And, it finally went to, they finally had to go to Nancy and say, Mrs. Reagan, you've got so much on your mind this week. Bill Clinton wants to speak. And she said, absolutely not. There was no love lost on the part of the Clintons toward the Reagans, and it was for sure that she was not going to allow Bill Clinton to speak at the funeral of her husband.
You gotta love tough Nancy Reagan and standing up and saying, "No way, no how, not happening." And I mean, I guess if it did happen during the Clinton administration, then he would have spoke. But
yes, exactly. Right. That's exactly right.
So now another thing you've got in here is that I didn't know this story either. Is how Ronald Reagan, after he was out of office, apparently went to go try to contact John Hinckley Jr., the guy who shot him and tried to assassinate him. Tell us about that story.
Well, it was actually during his presidency, and about 6 months after the shooting, he's fully recovered, fully functioning, and he gets an idea, and this speaks much to Reagan's deep Christian faith and capacity for forgiveness. He talks to the White House doctor, Dr. Daniel Ruge, and raises the idea about him meeting in private with Hinckley to tell Hinckley that he forgave him. Mm-hmm. Ruge was skeptical, but he went and met with the head of the psychiatric unit at St. Elizabeth's Hospital and the head psychiatrist for Hinckley. And Hinckley had 6 psychiatrists assigned to him, who were all tearing him apart. And he asked them. He said, "Look, the president would like to meet with Hinckley in private to tell him that he forgave him. What do you think?" And it was pretty much unanimous that it would be a mistake, not because they didn't want a visit from the president, because the authority for St. Elizabeth's Hospital had recently transferred from the D.C. government to the national government, to the federal government. Mm-hmm. And it was perpetually cash-strapped, and a visit by a president would bring a lot of federal tax dollars and improvements and things like that. But to their credit, they said absolutely not. This is the most self-absorbed, narcissistic, sociopathic individual we have ever diagnosed. Right. He is convinced of the righteousness of what he did, and if Reagan met with him, it would convince him in his own mind that he was right in shooting Reagan and the other individuals that day in 1981. So it was vetoed.
Mm-hmm. Now, Craig, can you again, folks, it's Breitbart News Sunday. I'm Matt Boyle, sitting in for Stephen K. Bannon. Our number here 866-95-PATRIOT 866-957-2874. We got on the line right now Reagan biographer Craig Shirley, the author of the new book Last Act: The Final Years in Emerging Legacy of Ronald Reagan. Now, Craig, I know we've got like 5 minutes here and a lot to get through. So the next thing I wanted to ask you about is, I know you've been pretty critical of Bill O'Reilly for his new book, Killing Reagan. Can you tell us what it is, just in about a minute or so, what do you think about that? And then I want to get into the House speakership stuff.
Well, it's thematically wrong. There are specific mistakes and errors and misstatements of fact, but it's thematically wrong. I mean, the theme of the book is that Reagan was a kind of an addle-brained doddering out to lunch, after the shooting, and Nancy ran the White House and ran the country, which is patently false. And it's, don't take my word for it. Take the word of Reagan's best friend and former counselor, Ed Meese. Take the word of Dick Allen, former National Security Advisor to the President of the United States. Take the word of John Hybush, who's head of the Reagan Foundation. Take the word of A.B. Culverhouse, who was chief counsel in the Reagan White House. There are literally, Marlon Fitzwater, who was the president's press secretary, said it was nonsense. There are literally probably half dozen and probably growing momentarily of former White House aides, Reagan White House aides, who saw him up close and personal, who utterly reject, refute, and deny that Reagan was ever out of it, that he, watched soap operas all day while Nancy was running the country. It's patently false.
Right, and obviously Bill O'Reilly never was up close and personal with Reagan like any of these guys were. So,
never met him. And the book just lacks scholarship. There's no bibliography. There's no list of people he interviewed. There's no endnotes. Nothing that would suggest real scholarship went into his book.
Interestingly enough, it's very similar to a lot of the things we see out of some of these people, these pundits that just put forward theories. Like the latest theory we always hear is that Marco Rubio is going to be the savior of the Republican Party, and Paul Ryan's going to be the Speaker of the House. And I mean, what do you think about Paul Ryan? I mean, come on, this guy is in favor of Obama trade, in favor of amnesty. I mean, like really badly in favor of amnesty, not just like wouldn't fight against it or something. I mean, like for 20 years has been one of the chief guys pushing amnesty, even back when he was a Capitol Hill staffer. And in addition to that, was pro bailout, TARP bailout. Do you think that Paul Ryan has the chops to become the Speaker?
Well, speaking of thematically, I would say, I mean, my own personal opinion is Paul Ryan is thematically wrong for all the reasons you cite. The Republican Party is going through and has been, as you know, Breitbart probably knows better than anybody else in the world, is the Republican Party is going through an evolutionary change right now, and just as it did with Reagan, it was the struggle between Reagan, the populist outsider, anti-establishment challenger of the status quo, versus George Bush, versus Gerald Ford, the defenders of the establishment, the insiders, the get along to go along types, and so this is a struggle that erupts every couple of years inside the Republican Party, and it's erupting again. It just happens to be, I think, more forceful this time than in the past. It was somewhat quieter in the past, but Gingrich, threw out the shackles of Bob Michael and the get along to go along Republicans and turned the Republican Party into a revolutionary movement. Reagan turned it into a revolutionary movement. Ryan is a throwback to the past, and the party is struggling to get to the future, and so therefore Ryan does not fit the narrative.
Now, I understand. As I understand it, you would support somebody like Newt Gingrich for Speaker of the House. I mean, or what do you think about him? There's talk of, we just had her on the program earlier tonight, Marsha Blackburn.
Marsha Blackburn would be superb. And what a woman, articulate, a principled conservative, a break with the past, putting our flag firmly down in the future. I think Marsha Blackburn would be marvelous.
And so, and then the last thing I wanted to ask you about in the last minute or so we've got left here is the connection between what we saw back in 1980 with the rise of Ronald Reagan and really the legacy that Reagan has left behind, and what we're seeing happen in the Republican Party now. What are some of the lessons that these candidates on the 2016 trail can learn from what Reagan did in 1980?
Always challenge the status quo. Never accept conventional wisdom. Reagan, Ivy League professor wrote yet another book on Reagan, in which she mistakenly got Reagan completely wrong. She said he was a reactionary. No, he was a revolutionary. Is that the Republican Party was about balanced budget? He said no, tax cuts. The Republican Party was about containment, détente with the Soviets. He said no, tear down this wall. We can defeat the Soviet Union. On issue after issue after issue, he was always challenging the conventional wisdom, always challenging the status quo, and that's really the essence of the American experiment and where the founders were. At the end of the Revolution, a letter was written from one of the framers to Thomas Paine, in which he said that the war is over, but the revolution goes on. And he was exactly right, is that the proper state of American conservatism is always in perpetual revolution.
All right, well, thanks so much, Craig Shirley. Thanks for taking the time on Sunday night to join the show. Again, folks, his book is Last Act, The Final Years, An Emerging Legacy of Ronald Reagan. Our guest here has been Craig Shirley, official Reagan biographer. Everybody needs to go get a copy of the book. Thank you so much, Craig, for giving us a call. Again, folks, it's Breitbart News Sunday. I'm Matt Boyle, sitting in for Stephen K. Bannon. We're going to take a quick commercial break. We'll be right back with the Conservative Review's Daniel Horowitz on why Paul Ryan is the worst choice for Speaker of the House.